better late than never, I think, because we did say we'd be live an hour and 15 minutes ago.
Yeah, that's not bad for us. Par for the course.
It is. Hunter B has been kind and donated $4.99. Thank you very much, Hunter.
Thank you, Hunter.
If you are enjoying our content, 29, 30, 31 seconds in, you can also donate via YouTube Tips. Worked well. Should be pretty simple from where you're watching. Or there is a Stripe payment link. We share the payments thirdly between myself, Griffin, and Ty.
Total divided by 3.
That's Ty's out on the screen as well. So there you go. You can't get rid of him, Griff.
Now, if someone were to donate a figure that can't be divided evenly by 3, how are we going? What's our protocol for who gets the extra penny or cent? Have we worked that out yet?
We'll speak to the accountants.
Yeah,
the money people.
Matty, it's cool. You can have it. I'm not worried about it.
No. I insist. You can have it.
No, you.
If I had a cent for every day that I was told, you know.
Matty, I have a question.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
I've
real quick, can I finish with? Can you hold the thought? Hunter also asked. I think after Will Anderson, I really think Will McDonald's going to be their second highest rated D end. He literally checks every box Pete likes in his DNs. Hunter, definitely some things to like about Will McDonald, but every box I'm not so sure, given he's 241 pounds. They'd like him to be a bit longer, but he definitely has the arm length, right? And then get off, toolsy, traitsy, spin move. Probably could do some dropping into coverage, although I haven't seen much of that on his tape. So, maybe we'll see. Typically, those kind of exciting, athletic, pressure rate, lighter edge rushers, Seattle have not shown an interested in when it's been like a day 2 type. I think of like Josh Uche or other people like that. So, yeah. But thanks, Hunter, for the donation. That's very kind. And thanks for the comment as well. Don't be afraid to get involved, people. Right, Griff, what was this other question, which I'm sure is to do with football? I have a question for you as well after that.
Okay, so it's more on the pronunciation, like word pronunciation. So I'm not going to say it. I'm going to type it in the chat here so that my pronunciation of it doesn't influence how you would say it. Okay. I just put it in there. Now say the word that I just typed in there. Because there are 2 common pronunciations, and I realized that I think that I belong to the minority. Why are you pausing?
Because I'm overthinking it. I'd say sentient.
Okay, now I say it's sentient. And then also further, the noun form of it, sentience instead of sentience.
Oh, parlay.
But juste un peu.
Oh.
Il y a beaucoup de raisons de parler en français.
Wow, très bien.
But I realized that not a lot of people say sentient. They say sentient. Now, sentient makes way more sense because you're pronouncing every vowel in there, and you're not turning a T into a CH like I am.
You are enunciating.
Yeah. Anyway.
Well, I occasionally, and other British people, have the habit of dropping their T's.
So you'd say sentient?
Sentient.
That's
but
fine.
I don't think when you're dropping a T's, you'd be saying a word like sentient.
Yeah.
I think you'd be saying like butter.
Yeah. Now, how about now? Yeah, right. So like your T's, like double T's turn into like D's, like cheddar or like better, rhymes with cheddar. We don't say better, we say better.
Yes. Right? Yeah, you could be right. Yeah. Very interesting.
Anyway, yeah, riveting topic. We're just two sentient beings discussing the pronunciation of sentient.
Yeah, so I started a mini argument in a bar this week.
Nice.
Because amongst my friends, because I asked what's your favorite type of nut.
Okay.
Yeah. So what's your favorite type of nut? And apologies to those who are allergic to nuts, because you're kind of left out here. I guess none of them.
There are a lot of good nuts, man.
There are so many.
There are. You know what's really good that every time I have it, I'm like, wow, why don't I try this more often? Is a Brazil nut. Those things are good, but I think ultimately, hazelnuts are my favorite.
Hazelnuts? Wow.
Yeah.
Well, so you're just like you're having them unsalted in a bag?
No, I'm thinking of hazelnuts are good. No, I'm wrong. I'm thinking of macadamia nuts.
Macadamias?
Just pop them in there.
I don't even know what macadamia is and anything.
You've never had a macadamia nut?
No, I have, but like off the top of my head, I feel like I should be able to more confidently recall what it tastes like if it was good. Like there might be an average pick. Because what happens is a lot of people say peanuts, right?
Not a nut.
Oh, you're
it's
that
a legume.
guy.
It's a legume. It's not a nut.
You're getting rid of them. Okay, that makes pistachios.
Yeah, those are good.
Very good. Now I had to stand on the table because we were seated, but there's a table.
Had to be done.
Yeah, I had to stand on the table for almonds.
Almonds are, classic. You can't go wrong with a good almond.
Salted with lots of sherry.
Now, yeah. Here's a question. What's your favorite nut candied?
Well, and you've already got rid of the peanut, which is a massive deal. So how does it get candied in America? Because we get like honey roasted. That's
we're versatile over here. I mean,
we can do putting marshmallow with it or some weird stuff.
When I think candied, usually they just like sprinkle it with like brown sugar and seasoning. Like I like sweet and spicy. Like pecans are amazing.
I'm a big fan of the chestnut.
Chestnut.
Are you going to say that's not a nut?
I'm not well versed enough on chestnut biology to really speak on on the manner. Is it another legume masquerading as a nut?
I feel like it might be, like if you think about what a chestnut, how it is presented.
Yeah, and we didn't even get into seeds. Like seeds are consumed like nuts, like sunflower seeds,
flax,
safflower.
Yeah, I'm not a big seed guy. Leave that to the birds. That's what I've always said.
Did I say safflower? I think I made that up. I think I got confused with safflower oil, which is used in a lot of recipes.
Did you mean sunflower?
It did say sunflower.
Oh, you did?
No, there are safflower seeds. Because of course there are, because it's flowers have seeds. Anyway. So Matty, I could talk seeds, nuts, and legumes all day with you, but
I'm trying to think about candied nuts.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I just want to finish on cashews are bad.
Also a legume.
I have
a secondary peanut.
Not even a nut, so I'd have to deal with them. But I have a big issue with food which is too sweet.
You don't like stuff that are super.
I mean, I'll eat them, but why are they so sweet?
Yeah.
Now, I don't have a problem with a hazelnut, or that's the bad example. Well, like a chestnut, right? That's sweet. I like that. But something about a cashew, it upsets me.
The texture just doesn't do it for you?
Yeah, a texture and flavor combination, perhaps. And also because they're often in with like almonds, peanuts, where they're like complementing each other really well. And then in comes the sweet cashew, and you're like, what on earth is this?
Right. Interesting. They are a little sweet. Okay, I was wrong. I called them a legume. They actually are a real nut. They're a true nut.
Well, that completely
Yeah,
are peanuts saved as well?
No, peanuts are not nuts.
Okay, you're really into your peanut. That's crazy. Have you been paid by a different type of nut company
Have I been paid by
bash the
Big Nut too?
Disinformation campaign around peanuts?
I would never speak on another man's nut preference.
No, you shouldn't. Like, however you like your nuts, we accept your nuts choice.
It's 2023.
Yeah, there you go. And we are a podcast which is actually looking to give you good information, and that includes on the Seahawks. So
you know what's nuts? The Seattle Seahawks.
Wow, they're so nutty, man. Right, let's do the podcast.
Right then.
Welcome to the Seattle Overload podcast, where Griffin and I are back. We're going to be looking at the NFL draft. It's coming up. Seattle picks at number 5 overall. There is a pretty decent chance they're going to be taking one of these game-changing defensive linemen. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about if they are game-changing. We also need to sort of look, Griff, though, at the state of the overall roster, the state of play. We've reviewed the defense, we've reviewed the offense. But like at this point in the offseason, should Seattle be making a trade? You're the wrong guy to ask because you're like, yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, my id is saying package fucking pick number 5 for Max Crosby and don't think twice. But no, you can't. I mean, that's not in their calculus. I think the only way a trade happens, a trade of note, is like maybe trade one of your extra day 2 picks for an established pass rusher or maybe a receiver that is kind of like in the mid-market deal. And, you know, the way trades work, you're not taking on everything in the contract, depending on how it's written. You kind of split it 50-50 with the team you're trading with, again, depending on how the contract's written. So I feel like there are some logical decisions there that you don't have to do, but you could do it. And really, I feel like, while the strength of this draft that we'll get into, I feel like is really day 2, day 3.
Yeah.
Well, I'm still not that ecstatic about it. There may not be a better way to spend a pick in the 90s on an established player.
Well, that absolutely matters, doesn't it? Like, I think at this point in time, your line of thinking here with the idea of Seattle making a trade is that the strength of the draft is kind of, I mean, it's all we've said a few years. Like, I think this is how it is, but it's always going to be in this kind of top 90 range, and then after that, it gets a bit like, you know, what are these kinds of players? Yeah. But this draft in particular, there's elements to it where you're like, okay, well, maybe it is worth considering trading for a veteran with one of those mid-round picks rather than drafting someone, simply because they're, you know, the way the draft's constructed. For instance, doing a mock draft, right? On the mock draft simulators, and there's names where I watch them at the Senior Bowl. I'm like, oh, that guy's interesting as like a, you know, he looks like a kind of day 3, day 2 guy. You know, you go and look up his production in college, and you're like, yeah, he's been all right. You know, he's also quite old. Yeah, you'd like that as a, say, like 4th, maybe late 3rd, you know, 5th round pick, that sort of thing. And then you go on the mock draft simulators and he's getting taken 38 overall. And you're like, so is that just an anomaly? Like, is this draft simulator rating this guy super high because, you know, they just like him for some reason? But then the more you do them, the more you realize actually this is actually a common occurrence where there isn't as many players as I perhaps thought. It used to be that the Senior Bowl, they might have like, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see the percentages of how many of the top 100 players, for instance, are from the Senior Bowl, attended the Senior Bowl, because I think it'll be a lot. Like, and that didn't used to, you know, it's been up on the rise, but I think with like NIL, the way that college football is changing, and also the COVID year, I think is still relevant. I think that you've just got this pool of players where a lot of them are seniors. That there isn't as much of the like underclassmen talent that you have. Like for instance, Jared Verse choosing to return. Yeah, it just feels like the draft, Griff, is not as loaded in the as you go on as you'd like, right? Like
it's, I mean, the second best interior pass rusher weighs 280 pounds. Like, can you even of this draft? Kalijah Kancey.
Yeah.
And I like him. He's really intriguing. But like when the second best interior pass rusher in the draft has a major question mark with, can he even be played on early downs? Like the fact that you have to even ask the question is concerning of itself. Now, smart teams can figure it out, but you don't want to have to figure anything out with the first round pick. You want to airdrop him and say, go play ball, So it's frustrating. It really feels like, there are very few blue chips, like true blue chips, guys that you want to take top 15 outside of, quarterback. Like I didn't feel that way last year. I mean, not every position was super strong last year, but like 2021 was a very strong draft also the year before. This year kind of pales by comparison. Now there are still good players. I think the strength of the class is probably in corner. There's not a corner that's as good as Stingley or Gardner last year, but like or anywhere close to like say Surtain or JC Horn, but there are still really good corners and there's a lot of depth there. So like that's cool. But like the tackles last year were better than this year. Well, obviously they don't need a tackle, but
yeah. So tight ends also really deep, isn't it? And
tight ends are deep.
And rookie tight ends in past years, drafting one, it's kind of an unknown as they transition from like college to an NFL world. A lot of the times they really need to adapt to blocking in line and blocking schemes of that nature. Mm-hmm. And often the guys who have blocked well in line have route running stuff they have to pick up. So It's often difficult. But this is supposed to be a deep tight end thing. But again, Seattle, okay, there's perhaps a subtle need at tight end now, but it wasn't the obvious need going into this draft. The problem really is that in this draft, Seattle, if you look at their major needs, it was still outside linebacker, edge, pass rush, and that's a weak point of the draft, right?
Right.
And then
go ahead.
Well, and then wide receiver 3, there is intriguing options, right? But there's a conversation to be had about. I think a lot of these guys who I'm seeing are high, I'm sort of like the projection to the league. Like, for instance, not to pick on someone, but like Jalen Hyatt out of Tennessee. I've seen him go 16th, 17th, 18th, that kind of range overall.
Yeah.
The guy is coming from an offense where there's no translation really to the NFL. Like it shows off he's fast and can catch, but like, route running wise, it's complete projection, and that's an example of what we're talking about of how guys have bumped up more than perhaps they would have been in past years, and how the projection element is more of a thing for a lot more of the prospects. There's no like sure certain elements. There's a lot less certainty, but like the fact that is a thing means that again there's a conversation to be had about maybe making a trade for a vet.
Yeah. There are some obvious names out there, kind of like we know Brandon Cooks wants to trade, but like if it only takes a 3rd round pick, I mean, maybe even because crazier things have happened. DeAndre Hopkins went for a 2nd round pick somehow. Now AJ Brown went for a huge haul just last year, but Brandon Cooks is coming off a down year and he's approaching 30 years old. I think he's still Brandon Cooks. I think he's just checked out last year. But again, with his age, like I can't see him commanding a 2nd round pick. I feel like it'd be a 3rd round pick, maybe even a 4th. If all it takes is a 4th round pick, you could not spend a 4th round pick better this year than on Brandon Cooks, even with the cap hit that you'd have to incur. But I don't know. So like other veteran options, like right off the bat, like T Higgins was rumored. That's just unrealistic. That's not going to happen. They're not going to be, because you have to trade for him and spend on him.
That would be crazy.
That'd be insanity. Now, he'd be a great player for them in every way imaginable, but that, especially with fitting around the skill sets you have, like it would be ideal even, but that's not going to happen.
He's the perfect in between, isn't he?
Yeah. Because you can slot him. He can
enough. It's not happening.
It's not happening. Another one that is potentially possible is like Chris Godwin, but he's probably going to command second round pick or higher. I mean, he also would be perfect in a lot of ways, like a power slot. He'd be great with Geno. It'd be great for what Waldron wants to do, independent of who his quarterback is. But like, it would be perfect, but it's probably too much. Now, if the Bengals want to shell out the cash for T. Higgins and pay him, they can get out of Boyd's contract, their third receiver, who's another slot receiver. They saved $9 million out of his $10 million cap hit. So he's probably going to be cut. But if you don't want to try to outbid anyone for him on the open market, I can't see him costing more than a third. So that'd be an interesting, avenue to explore. Like, hey, just throwing out a third round pick, who wants to take it? Cook's boy, that'd be interesting. Now, beyond that, I mean, Keenan Allen's probably going to be cap cut. So I feel like free agency, if they're going to acquire someone, a third established vet receiver, they're probably looking at what, $5-6 million cap hit at the very most. And that's where guys like a cap cut Keenan Allen comes in, because he can't stay healthy and he's getting older. So he's probably not going to get paid what he's worth, unfortunately for him. And then obviously Robert Woods was just cut. Now Robert Woods, he had a really bad year statistically. Coming off an ACL, though, he's another year older. Sometimes guys need another offseason removed from their ACL injury to kind of get the, whatever they have left of their explosiveness back and ability to, explode out of cuts and all that. If you'd be there, I can't see Woods garnering more than $5 million, given like recent history there. If I feel like that would be a low risk, potentially high reward type of decision there, because at worst he's just slightly better than Goodwin, and then at best, I mean, he's a high value third target that you can throw the ball to 80 times, and then not to mention ideal scheme fit, and he knows the offensive coordinator.
Yeah, and should say Marquise Goodwin, he offered a bit to the offense last year, kind of a glimpse of what a wide receiver 3 could do, but just got banged up midway to late in the season. He was added for just over $1 million last year. At 32 years old, he turns 33. It would be interesting to see him back in Seattle, but that's probably, I imagine they're going to look like elsewhere at different options. So like, it is a significant bump up to then consider like a Robert Woods, especially when he's, at his best, he's a much more multi-dimensional receiver. He can offer you much more of options like over the middle in the intermediate passing game as well, I'd say, along with the deep. But, it is a big question mark if he can get his agility back. And Rohan points out, would they even have the cap room to trade for veteran wide receiver if you re-sign Geno? I mean, if they wanted to, they could make it happen. But it is like, at what point, are they just going too much to make that happen? I think probably too much. Yeah,
it has to be way too convenient for whatever ends up happening. So
and honestly, in the draft, like, I think they should be able to come away with at least one kind of in between option, even with what I said about some of these guys getting inflated to like weird levels.
Right.
But like, what you've put Keenan Allen down as a free agent?
He's going to be cut. Yeah. So I like another, tall-ish slot receiver who just works over the middle, has really good ball skills. Now, the funny thing, because the guys that I mentioned, like Keenan Allen, even Godwin to an extent, Robert Woods, Brandon Cooks, all these guys have skill set mirrors in the draft, like really like square mirrors. Like you don't have to like BS that statement. Like you have a legit, like there is a Keenan Allen in this draft. There's a Tyler Boyd in this draft. His name is Jackson Smith and Jigba, more or less, but like close enough. He's there. Brandon Cooks is in this draft Elijah Moore's in this draft. He was a guy that was floated last year, right? Zay Flowers, and maybe Downs to an extent, or at least Downs is maybe more like I don't know, but Robert Woods, Brandon Cooks, Zay Flower. I mean, you're kind of talking same kind of usage in the scheme. So even if their skill sets aren't 1-to-1, but you want to go crazy, like Jordan Addison's right there. He's kind of a perfect combination of a lot of these types. So
yeah, I don't know. It's interesting how a lot of these guys. I mean, I guess size is rare at the NFL. The wide receiver position, but like, there's a lot of under 6 foot types who and with questions of, are they more of an inside outside guy or more of an outside inside guy, which is kind of what Seattle needs right now. They need that in between of Lockett and Metcalf.
Right.
Whether you go for like a pure slot type and allow Lockett to stay outside more, probably not, but you might lean more to being more of an inside kind of guy than a guy who goes outside. And if you're thinking about the playing time aspect and how Lockett had showed a reluctance to get yards after the catch, which good for him, but playing wise, that guy, if they're coming in the 3 wide receiver sets, most of the time they'll be getting those over the middle kind of routes from the slot. So it is encouraging. Like I need to watch, for instance, Tyler Scott from Cincinnati, who is not in like 5'11", 185-pound build, and I remember he stood out to me watching Desmond Ridder last year. So definitely going to be options there. But where there isn't options, Griff, is probably probably where there isn't options is outside linebacker in the draft, where like suddenly, you're like, okay, Uchenna Nwosu panned out great. Dow Taylor ended the season strong, but we kind of need, given that Bruce Irvin at 35 years old off the street was basically your starting outside linebacker opposite Uchenna Nwosu. Depth-wise, you've got Boye Mafe, who hope will take a jump, but we weren't that positive about his film coming out, although the athletic traits are obvious and the testing is. But like after that, Tyreek Smith, big question mark. He had a redshirt year, not really sure what he'll offer. He was a day 3 pick. Alton Robinson is an even bigger question mark. It sounds like he might not. He's had some complications coming off a knee injury. We'll see how that pans out, but doesn't sound great. So they obviously needed more pass rush, and edge-wise in this draft, Griff, it's Will Anderson Jr. as the top one, but we will talk about him in more detail. But then, like after him, I don't know, especially thinking like Seattle's running 3-4, right? And as they have for the last 4 years, your favorite line, and that would be in the old system like a Sam and a Leo sort of joined together. So we're talking here a 250-pound, 260-pound kind of guy. Hopefully would have arms over 34 inches long, has a quick get it off and wins with speed rush predominantly, and would not look out of place dropping into coverage. So they have to have some kind of hip fluidity and agility as well when they drop back at times. So you think basically Bruce Irvin at his prime is a pretty good indicator, especially as you go on, through the draft. Talking about Bruce's NFL usage there, because obviously at West Virginia he was a bit of rusher, but West Virginia he was winning with speed and he was just faster than everyone. He didn't really have a move; he just ran past people, and that would be ideal. However, in this draft, there's Will Anderson Jr. who, we'll talk about him, but as I repeat myself, but after him, there isn't the obvious, like, I don't really know how the class doesn't seem very good.
Like conventionally speaking, like the conventional 3-4 outside linebacker types in this draft, there isn't a lot of total talent, and then there just aren't that many bodies, period. Like at that spot, like that's why you kind of shift gears and start looking at the tweener types and there are some interesting options, and you can make the tweener types work, but you like to start with, okay, who are the guys that are overwhelming fits? So Will Anderson. Then after him, there's BJ Ojolari, and he's really the only other guy that kind of screams like fringe first round, early second round pick. if he came out last year, he'd probably be somewhere after Ebiketie and maybe around with Boye Mafe and Drake Jackson. Like he'd be right up there. So that's kind of what you're getting into.
Yeah, I remember last year we were like, oh, is this guy coming out?
Yeah,
because he was flashing. He has his best. He has speed. He has bend.
He's got good length too.
But what happened to him this year?
I mean, he was kind of more the same. He just didn't necessarily take a huge jump. Like he could be a good player. Obviously, like he's got NFL pedigree via his brother, who's a decent edge rusher. Led rookies in sacks his rookie year. He was good at Georgia, So I mean, like he's kind of like a prototypical. If he's there at 36 or 37, whatever that pick is, and if they take him, I'd be like, okay, sure. Yeah. But like after him, like, go ahead.
Compared to Ebiketie last year,
Ebiketie just has. I think Ebiketie's just has more weight behind every move that he like better density, more power, more play strength.
So is Ojulari, is he like a prospect which is bumped up because of the lack of the depth in the class? Like for instance, if he came out last year, well, we know he'd have been like a third round.
He probably would have been in that cluster with Mafe, Drake Jackson, and Benito.
Okay.
Yeah, like right in there. Like he would be like you'd have Ebiketie over him. And then you get into, okay, how do we sift through Ojulari, Mafe, Drake Jackson, Benito? Like he's right in there with that group. So like this isn't, he doesn't scream first round to me most years. And then after him, you got Nolan Smith, who weighs 230 pounds. Now, Nolan Smith, 230-pound guy, he's very good against the run. He punches above his weight, but like he's raw as a pass rusher. He has pass rushing traits. But for me, it's like he's a classic guy you take in the third round, beef up 10, 15 pounds and be like, hey, maybe he could be something. But with what he's working with right now, you can't justify taking him in the first or super early second.
And I've seen, again, in the mock draft simulators and even in mock drafts, I've seen him going in the second. So
yeah. And then after him, it's like Will McDonald, like his edge rush skills, like edge rush things he's got going for him are really, I mean, he might have the best pure bend, pure speed at arc speed in the class. But again, he's 240. Now he's another guy that plays fairly well for his weight, but 240 is still 240. The mass just isn't there. So,
and I think he'd have put on the mass if he could have. Like he played inside a lot.
Yeah, they had him playing 4-eye.
Yeah, and maybe if he comes into the combine at 250 and runs like a fast 40, fast 10-yard split jumps well, then maybe that sort of changed your mind. So the testing is going to be big for sort of sorting that out, but it especially feels like this year after diving into the tape that there's not as many like wow. I tweeted it. There's not as many wow prospects or guys I'm like I don't have as many questions about, or I'm like they're not jumping off the film. It's a bit less certain, so testing will be big now. But the reason we were talking about the edge class and the fact that after Will Anderson, there isn't usually that supplementary, like 2 extra first round picks that you'd kind of expect, is they could trade for one, right? So you've put here, Griff, Bryce Huff, Jacob Martin, remember him, and Chase Winovich.
Yeah, those are the guys that if they're going to go out and acquire someone in free agency, it's probably going to be like guys that are, again, under $5 million a year. Chase Winovich might even sign for $2 or $3 million.
I'd do that. I'd
do that.
We were talking before, little peek behind the curtain here, listener. We were talking before we came on air, and Griff was like, I saw he'd put Chase Winovich down. I was like, oh yeah, interesting. Like coming out, he's athletic, like talked about a lot. I did some things with the Patriots, good player. I didn't realize he'd been. I didn't realize he played for Cleveland last year.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that's about, and the fact he got hurt in his third year, and then this year he's a bit banged up as well. That could be an interesting.
He has so I mean, like the idea behind him is like obviously he's just a good depth player that could play 300 plus snaps for you. And if that's all he costs, I mean, he's basically an upgrade on Bruce Irvin, right? I remember watching him at Michigan when I was watching Rashawn Gary, I was more impressed with Chase Winovich than Gary. Now, obviously, Gary reached his potential, so good for him. But Winovich came out of the gate his first 2 years with absurdly high pressure rate, especially on pass downs. So, I mean, you can trot him out there and mix and match it. Like, if Winovich is healthy and kind of gets back to his Patriot self, if Taylor has another kind of stinker of a year, at least out of the gate, Winovich can be like your floor where you go, okay, we'll just play Chase more, and we can kind of get a floor of pressure with him. And if not, if Taylor becomes the guy, then you can just play Winovich slightly less. Now, guess
how old Winovich will be? April 19th.
28, right?
Yeah.
So here's the thing, though. John Schneider, he made that Chris Clemens trade early on, like the first offseason. He's probably been hunting for that diamond in the rough, a guy who has had some flashes in it early on in his career, edge rusher that can maybe be able to handle more. So, I mean, Chris Clemens had an up and down start to his career, but then obviously, as we all know, he had 30 sacks in 3 years with Seattle. So he's always looking for that guy, a guy that he can acquire relatively cheaply. So I don't know, maybe it's Winovich. Now, Jacob Martin's the other guy. They could bring him home. I mean, Martin is the same guy today that he was when they traded him to Houston. He's a good depth pass rusher who, again, raises the floor of your rotation, like the bottom of your rotation. Like those, we think like, oh, that's not exciting, but those guys play anyway, right? So you'd rather have that guy be Jacob Martin if you can, and if it's only a difference
not to pick on someone, but like better him than Darryl Johnson, like a guy off the street, right. And even like Bruce Irvin as well, as he played in the circumstances, like that obviously wasn't a plan. And it spoke to the lack of depth they've had from the lack of draft picks, over the past, prior cycles. So,
right. So,
and then Bryce Huff, that's an interesting one because he's a younger guy. That's a case of the Jets not wanting to, or not being able to pay. Why wouldn't they pay him?
Well, they probably do because they just cap cut Carl Lawson, right?
Right. Okay.
So segue.
So he plays on the edge as well.
Not only that, he plays on the right side, and Nwosu can do both, but Nwosu seems to prefer the left side too. Lawson is a rare edge rusher that prefers the right side. I mean, Lawson's really good. He's not as good as he used to be because of all the injuries, but if he could just stay on the field, he's still a good player. He's just not worth that contract. So I feel like he's a guy that can't sign for more than $4 to $6 million. I mean, that'd be fun. You worry about availability with him though. But he's another guy though that like I would geek out at. I mean, he is a edge rush connoisseur, like aficionado. Like it's tragic that he's hurt. He's been hurt.
Isn't he a shorter armed guy?
He's a shorter armed guy who wins with hand moves though, just because he knows what the hell he's doing.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. Well, there's your trade talk engaged with Griff.
Oh, no. We're not done.
What?
Trade, though? We're talking trade. If they want, so options for veterans. If they want to trade, the realistic, forget about Myles Garrett, forget about Max Crosby, with total wish casting. They could trade for, Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, Danielle Hunter even, which I doubt Minnesota would do. Those guys are contracts that are easy to get out of if you're looking to get out of them, especially if a 3rd round pick is enticing to them, to that team. I would send a 3rd round pick for Zadarius Smith easy. 31 years old, still very productive, scheme fit. Yeah, I'd do it. Sure, why not? So yeah, those are some names, but because they have to acquire 2 pass rushers this offseason somehow. They can't be theory. They need to be real, tangible.
And you don't mind when you say that it can be an inside guy and an outside guy, right? It doesn't have to be both.
It has to. I don't care where it comes. It has to come from somewhere, right? Preferably a guy that plays, at least 2/3 of the snaps, or half, depending on rotations and all that. So, yeah.
Okay. These are names. Hopefully that happens. I have a feeling that they're not gonna do this.
Yeah, they're probably not. But Lee La Riviere just said it, dropped in the chat. He mentioned Robert Beal Jr. I really like him to watch. I mean, when we watch Georgia, the Georgia defense. I mean, he pops a lot. I don't know why. I mean, I know he's a senior, but I don't know why he doesn't get more attention. I mean, he doesn't have crazy traits, but he has good traits, and he's really skilled. And again, like for those 245 to 50-pound edge types, play strength is a premium because so many guys look exciting and they don't do anything in the NFL because they're soft as tissue. But Beal isn't one of those guys. I mean, he plays.
Is he 33?
Yeah, he's 33. He makes plays.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
Anyway,
there you go. Right. So, and then interior defensive line wise, yeah, you put it, but it does feel very expensive compared to like some of these. I mean, trades for like the contracts and stuff like that, restructuring. Like Zadarius Smith isn't gonna want to go cheap with you, nor is Daniil Hunter, but a guy like as we've said, picking up like a Winovich, for instance, that in theory should be pretty affordable and cheap, and maybe a kind of depth move to make. But trade wise for the interior defensive line, the guys who can actually add pass rush as well, it does feel too costly.
It's just way too expensive. I mean, like those deals are designed to trade out of if they want, like DeForest Buckner, even Chris Jones, which isn't going to happen. I mean, there was some talk the Chiefs might try to move on from him just because of financials, which is so dumb. I hate that even like it should be. If Chris Jones is on your team, on no planet would I be looking to ever get rid of him ever.
He makes their defense go as well. Like,
yeah,
there's a lot of. He's one of those players who gets them out of bad play calls and bad situations often.
The only reason why he isn't talked about as potentially, the best defensive player in the league is because Aaron Donald exists at his position.
Yeah, I mean, I think he should have been. I think he should have been defensive player of the year this past year.
Yeah, it was a worthy season of it.
Yeah, he was ridiculous and played well down the stretch. Like he basically was their defense. So
yeah, so like another one is like John Allen could be traded, I think, and because if they want to pay Daron Payne, they might try to trade Montez Sweat, who's an edge, because they haven't paid him yet. If they want to try to keep Allen and pay Daron Payne, but then you'd think they don't want to double up at the interior at the expensive edge. I don't know, because they do have Chase Young. So that's just another like floating thought. But beyond that, like those are the only even available options, I think, and none of them seem really realistic for our Seattle Seahawks.
Okay. So pick number 5 overall in the draft is a decent opportunity. Like, we'd have taken that going in. And the fact is, with the way that the draft's set, as we've spoke about, this may be the shot to get the one outside linebacker who, seems definitely worthy of a first-round pick. May also be the shot to get a guy who is more disruptive on the interior of the defensive line than a lot of the guys, and maybe a chance to get the most athletic guy. So let's start with the guy who I think is the one you'd hope would fall to number 5 overall, but won't, and that's Georgia's Jalen Carter. So having watched more and more people, more and more prospects, like Carter's just clearly like the best. Like, it's just not.
He's the best player in the whole draft, any position.
Yeah, I think people overthought that, and then the weird stuff came out from Todd McShay reported character concerns, and maybe he said something to someone. Maybe he's clearly upset someone, or team's just trying to get him to fall. But like,
yeah,
he plays hard. He runs around the field. I don't understand.
I mean, there's probably nothing to that. That said, the Georgia, LSU, Alabama programs are very good at burying bad news about players, like extremely good at making stuff go away. But there's nothing with Carter. Like that's just nonsense. To me, like even you can't even do like the concern trolling. Oh, he takes plays off, like which is always a trite observation. Anyway, he runs sideline to sideline.
Most of the plays he's running like 30 yards when it goes sideline to sideline, because Georgia have him as a 4-eye, then it's pass, so he has to then loop outside to the tackle. Then he has to then run across the, like, if you expect him to be sprinting after all that, then you know, and also that doesn't really translate to the NFL because the hash marks are tighter. There'll be less of that kind of stuff as well, less moving of the front in that way. And yeah, like the TCU game, people said how he disappeared. He didn't. Like he was wrecking shop in that game.
Yeah.
And like the one thing you could point towards with Carter is the lack of sack production, if you like. But for me, that's not that concerning, given like he wins so fast that usually, you know, if you're going to get sacked from the interior, you're kind of cleaning up for guys behind. But because he's usually the first one to win, he's flushing the quarterback out of the pocket. I actually think in the NFL, where say, you know, you have a more reliable edge set and just edge rush spacing, because again, Georgia, they're playing a lot of 3-man fronts.
Yep.
When you get into 4-down rush spacing, you have 2 guys flying off the edge. He'll get more sacks, like he just will, because the parameters of the pocket will be set in a way that allows him to do that. But yeah, he wins so fast that he wasn't able to do it, and so he only had 6 sacks in his college career over 3 years. I'm not concerned about that.
Yeah, I'm not concerned either. Also, more further to your usage point, like they also have him playing 2-eye a lot in their over G front. So like, and he was still productive out of that position, but like he wasn't even being optimized. Like they had him doing a bunch of grunt work, which kind of like you could lead off at this point. Like he's a football player before even like his special traits. Like he's technique, you know, smarts, and like just you know, just sound play. So like that's where you start with him. Even like that's what he builds out of, and then what makes him ascends him into absurd heights is all the explosive traits and quickness and agility and stuff. Now and technique. But so like even to his like the production concern, because that's the main concern with Jalen Carter is the raw volume. So if you're going to have any sort of like, well, what's a negative? It's like raw volume, whereas the main negative with Will Anderson is probably like pure bend, for example. Because each of these guys, the guys at the top of the class, have a drawback. But with Jalen, it's on a rate basis, he's right in line with other formerly, you know, highly drafted interior defenders that were productive in the NFL. So like he had 8.5 tackles for loss in 2021, 7 this year. And he played like 300 something snaps each year. So his first year, his sophomore year, 2021, he's on a crazy deep rotation, right? So like you're playing on the same line with Devontae Wyatt, Jordan Davis. They had 2 other guys that were like pretty good, like 78, I think. I think 98 was a good player as well. So I mean, he's out producing all those guys. Like, and very few of those guys actually had a lot of counting stats either. Like again, it's like you said with the scheme in front usage, like it doesn't really let one guy go crazy. It's like the production was dispersed. So he's out producing highly drafted guys ahead of him that are out snapping him. But then if you scale his stats to that of a 3-down full-time player, like a 700, 800 snap player, I mean, his TFLs are like 15, 16. And then if you go look at which TFLs actually, I think they project to more sack production in the NFL than sacks do, even because sacks are such a fluky stat. Like TFLs are really like, if you're going to use a like statistical projections, TFLs are more valuable than sacks even. But so 15 TFL seasons, 6 sack season in college as a true sophomore, and then as a true junior, that's right in line with Chris Jones, Gerald McCoy, Ndamukong Suh's earlier years, because his 5th-year senior year at Nebraska was insane, like all-time stuff. But you look at Ndamukong Suh, Gerald McCoy, Chris Jones even. I mean, Quinnen Williams was absurdly productive, right? But Jeffrey Simmons, like all these guys that we consider elite, He's right up there with them. Like he's hitting the thresholds if you scale it to their snap count. So, and then just on top of that, you look at pressure rate, which can be a little funky, but like win rate and even PFF grade, like they're the only measures available. You'd rather see him rank highly in all those measures than not. And he's absurdly high, like just behind Quinn and Williams for recent defensive linemen in the last 5-10 years. So I mean, he passes the stat sniff test, the production sniff test. You just have to account for some of those things. So yeah,
and then sort of translating how he'd fit in Seattle, I mean, his block recognition, his ability to play in that kind of 2-eye and heavy 3-tech alignment like the front Seattle run, but also as a head-up nose tackle, like he'd fit right up in the front Seattle uses. He straight up wrecked plays, from a variety of alignments in the run game and the pass game. And then the way that he wins in the pass game, like obviously he has speed to power, but then the way he kind of gets skinny on guards and gets in like a head up position and then quick swims into the backfield for quick wins. I think that translates to the NFL as well. Like I don't, and like the Florida game against Osiris Torrance, people there's talk that he struggled. I think that was just a good matchup. Like, and Florida's offense was getting the ball out pretty fast.
And he still has some pretty high profile wins run and pass against Torrance.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, like the fact that he can even be explosive and productive out of like a frog stance playing the 2-eye, which is essentially like, what am I trying to say? Like the like the 4-eye, like the heavy 4-eye play, the heavy 2-eye play, like the mirror stepping and stuff like that. So he the fact that he can get explosive and upfield out of that is really impressive. But then like as a pure 3 technique where he's a more staggered stance, more one gapping, I mean, he can win every way. He can win pure speed, he can win pure power, he's got counters, he can counter off of power, he's got handwork at the top of the rush. I mean, he can counter off the speed. I mean, he's got everything. He is displayed like, he's a 3-way go type of player.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah, he is a three-way go type of player. That's a good way of phrasing it. And yeah, he could play. Whatever Seattle wanted to do next year, he fits. But like for instance, what they tried last year, he'd be fine. Like he could play across the D line, 5-tech to head up on the center. So that that's an every down player in Seattle. It's just, and he only turns 22 on my birthday on April the 4th. So he is
about that,
young as well, which the other 2 guys we're going to talk about aren't. So it's unlikely that Jalen Carter is going to be a Seahawk, because even though they picked 5 overall, there is going to be, I think, a lot of interest in his game above Seattle, and it's probably too good to be true. He's so good, and like it's just so obvious that like he'll be good, in my opinion, that I wouldn't be opposed to, if it gets to, if he doesn't get taken 1, he doesn't take him 2, he doesn't take him 3. If you want to make it a certain thing, a very small trade up, I wouldn't be opposed to. So,
I mean, I wouldn't hate it if it means Jalen Carter's in a Seahawks uniform. I don't care the means really, but
because I think he's that special,
Yeah. I mean, he's not going to be Aaron Donald, but he can be on the Chris Jones tier, which I think Aaron Donald's in his tier by his own. Chris Jones is then the sole occupant of the second tier of the elite guys. And then there's like 5 names in that third tier, of which a guy like Quinn Williams is currently ascending. He may be able to get into Chris Jones' tier. I think that Jalen Carter can get into that tier by year 2, year 3 of his career. So, I mean, that's an absurdly useful player. And also, it's not just his production. He can get you pass rush in fronts meant for the run that make you feel compelled to play those fronts more, because then you go, okay, we can still have a 4-man rush here.
That's what he did for Georgia.
Right.
He's getting pressure and wins from weird spots in weird situations. It shouldn't be happening.
Right.
And honestly, it'd be really cool to see him in more, okay, you're the 3 technique with manufactured ways to get you one-on-one. We know it's pass. Go and beat that guard. Like that, I think some crazy stuff could happen. So
yeah.
So trying not to get too upset about that, probably not happening. Anyway, there are 2 other players. Now, let's deal with the first obvious one. Alabama outside linebacker Will Anderson Jr. So for this to happen, Seattle picks 5 overall. There's been a lot of talk about the quarterbacks in this draft. You'd need 3 quarterbacks to go in the first 4 picks, or you need like 2 quarterbacks to go in the first 4 picks and say like a cornerback like Witherspoon to go, and then Seattle can pick Will Anderson Jr. That's not out of the question. Like, there's a lot of talk about the quarterbacks, and for it to be all quarterbacks, all defensive linemen in the first 4 picks, that feels unlikely. Like, mix it up. What about a receiver just getting involved? I don't know. We'll see. But maybe a tackle suddenly rises, but I doubt that. Anyway, so say Will Anderson Jr. does fall to the Seahawks. I have to say, like, watching him, I don't know what I was expecting because I hadn't really watched him properly, and I'd seen like the highlight clips of him beating a tackle, much faster get off, beats the tackle basically out his stance, and then he's able to win the edge, get the edge, rush wide through the arc and reduce down and get the sack. It's like, oh, this guy is going to be like he's like the perfect fit. You look at the size, like he's an outside linebacker in a 3-4. Okay, he's gone to Alabama. I'm sure he can do the pass coverage. And then you like watch him and you're like, oh, this is not the kind of speedy, bendy kind of dude I was expecting. And what stands out is Alabama's playing him inside a tackle as a 4-eye, and he is like holding up. He's got incredible play strength against the run. The way he strikes guys, the way he strains, the way he gets under people's pads, the way he just takes on blocks so violently and with excellent leverage, and his handwork of getting his outside arm involved as well to keep himself clean. He's just playing right on the edge of his frame and his abilities against like big tackles, getting right under their pads, rocking them back, like brilliant. And it's like, oh, well, the run defense will be fine with him. You could rely on him to set an edge, and he's obviously a smart football player. He'd really solve that problem of you wouldn't know. He'd be like what the Bruce Irvin edition was meant to be, but on like completely to a different level, like with the production, much better. But and it wouldn't be like Darryl Taylor not being able to set an edge and Nwosu. Like you could have Anderson in there on base, and then But as a pass rusher, like I was kind of not really seeing this as much as I thought I would.
Yeah. All right. So I'm Carter over Anderson, right? But I still think that he's like a top 10 pass rushing edge prospect. I don't think he's like unanimous, like, top 3 pick, like most years, like Nick Bosa or Myles Garrett. I don't think he's up there. Watching him in 2022 is different than watching him in 2021, though. I mean, he was hurt this year. He was hobbled. That said, he still had some really higher profile games. But even in his true sophomore year last year, you're right. He's not like the Von Miller type, like get off, bend, flexibility at the top of the rush, stuff like that. So, but like, what is he though? Like, I still think he has good get off. I think he has decent, like good bend, just not great bend. And then I think that, he doesn't have like innate, like crazy flexibility where he can dip under guys. But I think part of that also is like deliberate choices he's making, like further making it look worse than it actually is. But like, what is he though? I mean, he's essentially like a speed, strength, finesse guy, where he plays with, like, he gets speed to get position on the tackle when he's rushing up the arc. And then from there, where it really sets him apart as a trace player is he has absolutely like generational play strength for a guy that's 245. Like at the top of the arc, he gets his hands on you, he's winning the rep. Like you're at his mercy at that point. Like, and he's a technique oriented player who actually only has a couple of moves. So like he can pick up moves, I think, no doubt, like expand his tool belt, because he's already so dependent on winning with moves, stuff like that. So like wrist control is everything. And then from there, he can transition into his rip without losing any ground, like on the quarterback. So, cause like drifting down the pocket is a big problem, right? For the edge rushers, you need to be able to corner early. I think he has that capacity to do that and like ride a rip and maintain his path. I think that's where he can be really good. But for a player who is built around that, what I did see a surprising lack of is like footwork to set up the tackle a little bit, like where the jab steps, where the little sudden shimmy movements. Now, when he did do them, they worked to a devastating effect. So it's trite for a podcaster to sit there and be like, well, do more jab steps. But like that's just how you felt watching him. Like, do more of that, like use more footwork to set yourself up better at the top of the rush, because I mean, he has terrific lateral quickness. That doesn't necessarily mean like change of direction or like, you know, like pure bend, but like that first step suddenness is way up there. That's why like he has good counter moves at the right off the snap, where he can work inside really quickly. It's the same concept. Instead of going outside in, going inside out too. So like, and that's how he can offset like the pure speed issues. Again, like the arc speed is still good. It's just not great. I think he just kind of needs to put it all together. I think he can be an elite edge rusher. Now, the other side of it is, like you said, he played a lot of 4-eye. A lot of his reps are just not good reps, like to evaluate at all, because they have him lined up in the B gap and expanding out. And then further, I feel like it seemed like whoever was rushing opposite him was given the liberty to like rush the full depth of the pocket, and he was the guy who had to retrace and to account for the quarterback scrambling up the middle or escaping in general. So I wondered how much of it was like coaching points where he wasn't able to like, you know, go full tilt all the time because they wanted him to be able to work back. So that meant he was capping his rush off a lot. Like there were times where it felt like, why did you stop? You didn't have to. And I wonder if it was how he was coached. Now, those issues tend to alleviate a little bit in like, you know, the third and long situations, or like games where like high profile games like Georgia 21, Cincinnati 21, I think are really important games, because it shows like what get off he does have a little bit more on display, and he was consistently beating their tackles.
No, his get off the ball was really good, like snap timing wise, like really good, almost like hard to get better than that. The thing I found was after that point, like his speed up the arc, it wasn't as you know, it wasn't like elite. It was fine, but like we're talking about top
not
5
elite,
players,
yeah.
so it's kind of like and really, you know, unsurprising given his amazing strength, but he likes to kind of work tighter paths on tackles. Like even in opportunities where he could have aligned wider, he's really trying to work like a tighter alignment and then get his hands into them, like a forklift move, and even like headbutting guys in his rush paths to get up and close to them, and then when he can rip through and win the edge, or swim past and win the edge. Like there wasn't too many wide wins, and you know, you mentioned the Cincinnati game where there is that wide win because he's just faster than the tackle at the set. But it's like, you know, what is that tackle compared to like an NFL guy where you look at him against Tennessee and Malik Wright, you look at him against Texas A&M's tackles where he's not really winning. Like he's having some reps where he's going speed to power and the tackle's having to anchor in there, but he's not winning the edge. He's not really doing much as a pass rusher for me.
Now see where I feel like where we can kind of put this into perspective a little bit is like Kayvon Thibodeau last year, there were concerns about his pure agility at the top of the rush. he was like a bat out of hell right off the snap, but then there weren't actually as many like wide arc wins as you'd think either. He kind of wanted to go speed to power a little bit more than maybe he should have. Now maybe he has more pure speed, more pure arc speed. And it was like a rush plan thing. But like I would take 2021 Will Anderson over Kayvon Thibodeau, and I like Thibodeau quite a bit. It was willing to kind of live with him not checking off the boxes he's supposed to check to the level that you want him to check them off. That was bad phrasing, but I don't know. I feel like if it doesn't sink Thibodeau, it shouldn't sink the prospect of Anderson at 5. It's just, I don't know. I think he's far and away the best edge rusher in the class, but that's because this edge rusher group isn't that great. And I'd rather have Jalen 100%, but like I would still be ecstatic by Will Anderson. Again, like I think he's elite run defender too. He gets into the backfield. He's a football player before he is anything else, like great technique, taking on blocks, all that stuff. So I don't know, man. That's just how I see it. But yeah, I get it. Like I feel like if he can refine his technique a little bit, because he's not raw, just needs experience and refinement, and put in a scheme where they kind of let him tee off a little bit more, I think he's got more in him, and I think he could be really, really productive. But we also talked about this off air. Like he needs to not be 245 though. He needs to be 255. He needs to put on weight. Yeah.
So that sounds silly though, because we said he has elite play strength. So why does he have to be bigger?
It's because it would compound what his strengths, right? Like positively, because I don't think it would make him much slower. It would just make what he's already good at even better.
Yeah. And we should say, like, over 3 years at Alabama, he did have 34.5 sacks. So like he was productive. It's just the way him. I wanted to see him win in ways which were like, just bending the edge, dipping around the edge, and that's just not who he is. So that's wrong of me for my expectations. But knowing him, what like the Seahawks would want from a outside linebacker, edge rusher type, it's really not. It's not the complete ideal prototype. And honestly, a lot of this as well is like it's so weird. Seattle picking in the top 5. I don't know sort of how to handle it. I'm maybe expecting my expectations too much. And when we talk about adding weight, Anderson turns 22 in September. Like he is young, as you said. He is he has room to develop. He's still growing as a man. Like his body's still developing. He's still working all that stuff out, and he is a really good football player. Like at the end of the day, if you take a really good football player with really high SEC sack production, you're probably not going to go wrong.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's nitpicky to say like against like the better tackles, especially like this last season. And I only watched 2022, so I need to watch 2021. I would if Seattle took it, but I don't think it's nitpicky to say that you would like you'd like him to have a bit more of a rush plan. Like I don't
see. That's the thing. I think the coach is kind of screwed.
I think his coaching. Yeah, that's true. Because like also when you talk about him being the retrace to the quarterback guy, like they were running so much mirror stuff where the other dude's rushing around the back of the arc, and he's designed to just loop inside and spill it to that guy. Like
yeah. I mean, it's not fun watching either of those two, Alabama or Georgia, rush the passer for individuals. I mean, they have a great collective team rush plan, right? Like stellar, but it's not fun to like. They're not trying to get their guys drafted any higher than they're already going to be drafted because they have the Alabama name brand, the Georgia name brand, so they don't need to accentuate them. They're trying to win football games. It's just the game is different at college, obviously, than it is in the NFL. So,
and on the jab step thing as well, like when he, the few times he did pop that out to like work the angles, that really looked good. It's just,
I mean, he's elite at cornering, and he's going to be even better at it. So it's just rare to talk about a top 5, top 10 edge where the best trait is their play strength at the top of the arc. It's their ability to corner. Like with technique, is usually you're talking about like the lower body traits, right?
he just plays like a sort of a heavier edge. Like usually you'd expect like looser hips, and he's just kind of
he's a little bit more like mechanical. See, so comp wise, now this guy had a little bit more like wiggle to him, but the way like Justin Houston ended up perfecting his game. Justin Houston was speed into position, and then from there his hands took care of the rest, or is a conversion to power. I feel like that's what Will Anderson needs to try to be like in terms of what his process, like the Justin Houston kind of process. Because I think he can win with the same few moves, rinse and repeat, the way Houston has, even when he was with the Chiefs in his prime. Like Justin Houston, I mean, he had get off. Don't get me wrong, he had bend, but he wasn't winning the same way Von Miller was. I mean, Khalil Mack, see, the thing about Mack is that he was 260 moving that way. So like that
was
matters.
More obvious. Yeah.
That's 20 pounds of difference. So like, I'm not going to comp Will Anderson to Khalil Mack, even stylistically. It's just, he needs to, I'd really like to see him put on 10, 15 pounds minimum and see how he handles that weight. Cause I feel like that would unlock him. But still, so like we're asking these questions of a guy who could be picked at 5th overall. That's why we prefer Jalen Carter, because there are no questions about his play style or anything. Like with Carter, you're just parsing shades of eliteness, not is he elite or not,
And also it matters. Like Matt coming out, I'm pretty sure was a senior. Like so he had another year to develop, like just as a body wise. Anyway. Yeah. So there is a conversation which has been brewing in like national circles, much like how we've sort of got close to almost overthinking Anderson, but I don't think so. It's just like valid things to talk about. But there's a conversation, especially after the combine, which is next week, over whether a traitsy, high testing edge who has that kind of like speed, or just pops off the screen athletically, would go before Anderson. And if Anderson at the combine doesn't jump that well, or has slightly shorter arms than you'd expect, I don't think the arms will be an issue, but he might not run as fast as like this next guy for like a height weight profile. Then maybe say Texas Tech's Tyree Wilson, with the way the NFL loves to get traitsy with guys, maybe he goes before Anderson, which kind of seems unheard of, but like Wilson, he's a senior, right? No, he's not. He's not a senior.
Tyree Wilson, he's not a senior? I thought he was. Or he's a 4-year player. He might be a redshirt junior.
He's a redshirt junior. There you go. So he turns 23 in May. So he's got that extra year. And going from watching Anderson to Wilson, like immediately, and obviously Wilson's level of comp isn't quite the same, but like just athletically, Wilson is just like he's like a different level of player. He's also a completely different player, which
he's a way different. Yeah, he's a way different like composition. So like just for Seattle's purposes, he'd be an outside linebacker at 280 pounds. So he's an edge that is big. He's not a big, he's an end that is big, or an edge that is big. He's not a big end though. Like I don't want to see him playing 4-eye, 4 technique, the occasional 3 technique. Like he's not Michael Bennett. He's not, he's not that kind of guy. So that means, it's going to be annoying because you're going to have to see him in coverage if he pans out, and you have to play him all these snaps. You're going to have to see him in coverage every so often, but it wouldn't be unprecedented. I mean, like there are tweener types or bigger outside linebackers in 3-4 base schemes around the league in recent history that have had to drop some. Like Lamar Woodley was pushing 275, 280 in Pittsburgh. Tamba Hali is a classic example. That guy was 275, and they had to drop him every so often. You just have to do it. Like we saw that they were able to drop Carlos Dunlap in 2021 and not stress him too much, and it didn't hurt the defense. it would pretty much be the same thing with Tyree Wilson. So yeah, and he's not a fish out of water. He's done it a little bit. Like he understands how to do it. It's just occasionally there's the threat of, he's matched up on a wheel route. What's going to happen here? So you have to account for that sort of thing.
I want to go back and watch 295-pound Julius Peppers in pass coverage.
Right.
Different.
Julius Peppers is I don't know how he even existed.
Yeah, that's always crazy to me.
Exists.
But yeah, so like
yeah,
Wilson on the inside, like he did it a fair bit because that's what the college defenses do. He did play inside, but in terms of as a 4-eye, like anytime he has his hand in the ground or two hands in the ground, so he used a 4-point kind of frog stance in the 4-eye, but he's so late off the ball, and it's not because he's trying to mirror, it's just because he's like he doesn't know where he's looking. Like he's just so raw at that. He exposes his outside pad, his pad level's bad. He's just playing out there. He's just looking to run into the guy in front of him and push him back and get as much depth into the pocket as possible. But like in terms of how Seattle plays that technique, the mirror stepping, it'd be a complete projection there. Now, why that matters is if you're drafting this guy at 5 overall, or maybe do a mini trade down, take him at 7. Don't think that can happen, but maybe. Right? If you're drafting this guy at 5 overall, you know, if he's going to be an every down player for you, like, and Seattle isn't going to be playing 2-4-5 nickel looks as much as they can this year, they will have a much more obvious, I think, matching a personnel approach that didn't exist last year with Pete Carroll's comments. I think basically their base is 3-4 bear, where a Tyree Wilson type, like, you know, in terms of the size, like, you know, pushing 280 pounds, they'd be expected to play over a guard, like a 3 technique. Or if, you know, Seattle gets a tight end out there, then they'll bump their front into having a 5 technique. So a guy outside shoulder to tackle. Wilson could do that, I think, but it would be a work in progress, right? Like it'd be a big work in progress. You'd have to work his stance. You'd have to work how he's you know, his footwork out of his 3-point or 4-point. You just have, and you know, he's just like very, very raw. And so then what we're talking about is a year 1 guy who can't get on the field in these base 3-4 situations, which that's not good, because if you're saying he's an outside linebacker, right? Well, then you go back to why they got rid of Carlos Dunlap, as you were saying, because he's like, and there are a few snaps of Wilson in coverage. He's just awkward. Like he doesn't know what he's doing, but he's also, you know, he's probably not been told to do much. But also, like, he's tall, he's big, he doesn't have agility. Like, it's not his game, which is fine. It's just why that matters is if Seattle's running a 3-4 base, the whole reason they moved to actually being a 3-4 in name as well as nature is that they wanted to be able to play left and right with these guys. They didn't want to have a tell. They didn't want it to be, every time KJ Wright is down to the boundary, we know that it's cover 3 because Carlos Dunlap's to the field and he ain't going to drop and he's going to rush. And every time Carlos Dunlap's to the boundary and KJ Wright's to the field, we know it's going to be cover 2 because Carlos Dunlap ain't going to drop into coverage. And KJ Wright, why would you rush him over Dunlap? Now, obviously, you can send both edges, but like you need to be able to play right and left of the coverage as well. And Wilson really he'd be more like a Dunlap, as you've said, Griff. So he's like a weird kind of tweener where you can envision what he could be, but you'd have to try and get him playing well on the kind of early down stuff, which is a complete projection. Like, I mean, there's a athletic trait definitely, but.
I mean, athletically, he's an elite height, weight, speed guy. I mean, I think he's more intriguing as an overall prospect, although he's, you know, slightly different than like Travon Walker last year. Like, I mean, Walker was way overdrafted in my opinion, but like I'd rather roll the dice on Tyree Wilson just because I think he projects better as a pass rusher. But yeah, so like it's the sacrifices that they'd have to make. I don't think they're afraid of making as a rule. I do think that they would express hesitance making that for, again, a guy that would be picked in the top 10. Like it's an even more extreme example of all the variables we talked about with George Karlaftis last year, who was 275, and then he ran at the combine at like 268 or something. So we got down a little bit. But I mean, we were talking about like, well, do they want to draft him because he's not a super easy square fit in the scheme? Tyree Wilson's even less of a square fit, quote unquote, this year for all the reasons you said. So I don't know if they want to rearrange themselves for that much for a guy that they don't have a perfect vision for immediately.
No,
at 5, at 7, at whatever.
What I would say is Seattle will, because the NFL is largely nickel, Seattle will still play nickel, right? Like there's no reason to think that their run defense will be as bad as it was this past year. So, along with the fact that teams are largely 3 wide receiver sets anyway, but like they also won't probably have as much success running the ball. So that Seattle will probably run, they will still be running the 2-4-5 nickel fronts, and Wilson in those would be that kind of, just simple terms, like that kind of 4-3 kind of end that you need to be able to set an edge. In the 4-down nickel fronts, Seattle doesn't drop those guys into coverage, or very rarely does.
It does raise the floor significantly, the run defense of that front, right?
Massively, because he's super long. He's really accomplished in a 2-point, and it's hard to quit like how his length and how he just completely just wrecks tackles. Like it's just clear he's just the best athlete on the field by some distance. And the fact that he's doing it while like he's late off the ball, like his get off was like like the ball snapped and he's slow out his set and he's still wrecking guys. Like it's like, okay, what do we have here if we coach this guy up to play a bit more football,
Yeah. And like the ground that he does cover after like his second and third step, or even in his second and third step, is crazy. And you think about how that translates to like, stunts and stuff. If they want to, like, even if they play the 2-4-5 less, they're still going to need to add in more calls with it. And like the 49ers, the way they defend the run, they have a lot of line movement when they're in their even space fronts. They're 4-2-5, which is in effect the same thing. The ground that he covers on stunts for Texas Tech, I mean, he wrecks things just because like his wingspan's absurd and all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, he does help you there. Like your 2-4-5 stuff, like again, like their problems there is predominantly like situational usage. Like they're using it too much in the wrong situations, but when he is out there, he still improves it. Like when Seattle played a lot of it years ago, it was because they had Michael Bennett to the bubble. And, he was a well-sized end, not as big as Tyree, but 6'3", 275, 280 with good length. He was able to, like space matters, right? It's not just good play, but you have to be like length can help you. So that's where Tyree can come in as well. Like, what do we think of him though, as an actual like pass rusher? Because that's what they're after. They're after a blue chip pass rusher. What do you see there watching him?
It's hard because he's just wrecking shop. Like it's just athleticism taking over. Like he stabs a guy down the middle of his frame, and then he's just much more athletic than the guy. Very fast getting into an inside move, and
he's pretty flexible for his size.
And
like like when he's expanding out, like he can like adapt his footwork in stride. Like he's not like some of these guys are so big, once they get going in one direction, they just need to commit to the direction there. Like he has subtlety to his footwork. Like he can change his angles and stuff as he's rushing, which is just rare. Like again, like Carlos Dunlap is a name that I think he's a little different than Carlos Dunlap, but Dunlap still fits the bill of a guy who can move well in space. Tyree Wilson can move well in space for a guy his size.
And I need to the Sports Info Solutions draft hub hasn't updated yet. Like I think they're in the process of updating it, but like I believe Pro Football Focus had him with the highest pressure, like one of the highest pressure rates amongst college football. Like
his ability to reduce at the top of the arc and get skinny reminds me of someone that I don't think I should say, but it does remind me of someone with this similar enough composition. Should I?
Yeah, go for it.
It reminds me now, just this element, like his ability to like reduce his pad surface while moving that big, like moving at that size,
eating
at
up
that speed
ground
is JJ Watt. I'm not comparing him to JJ Watt as a player collectively, but the way like JJ Watt can reduce his pads at his composition. I mean, Tyree's a little more top heavy than JJ, but he can still play.
You know where that shows up as well? Like, and he sometimes got this wrong, but say he's being read as the backside edge defender on zone read. He was able to like take away, charge hard at the quarterback, the keep read, and then scrape down the line of scrimmage to run away, like wide run away, and beat like split action blocks as well. And it's just the way he's able to angle down and redirect for a dude his size, moving fast, and everything's happening quick, and also having the arm length to finish the play, make the tackle. Yeah, it's pretty uncommon. Like it just
his balance. Yeah, the balance is crazy.
And it's all that stuff which you've articulated much better than me, but like it's all that stuff which it was pretty stark watching that. It's like this guy is like, after watching Carter's obviously like a completely different player, big defense tackle type. Then watching Will Anderson, again, completely different player, but like, I was expecting a bit more like juice. And then watching Wilson, where I was like, this guy is just like, he's just moving like it's completely different. I've never had, it's just weird seeing, not weird, but amazing seeing someone able to have such ability to move, like control their body at that size and that height and with those arms. And it's very
we talk about him as a ceiling potential guy because he's so like, I don't know if, he's raw and that there aren't a lot of technical moves, but the floor is already pretty high with what he's working with. Like the guys can't handle his power.
And he's still working it out, there's a lot of stuff where just a bit more, a bit more learning, a bit more coaching, and suddenly you're like, whoa.
And he's still mindful about like trying to grab wrists and stuff. It's just he doesn't have moves to build off of that. So like he can still controls the block, but when you're trying to like look for, all right, are moves possible? Like, can this guy learn it without just it being like total like wish casting? For a guy like he has good reactive ability, like he like reaction time, like he grabs hands. He just doesn't do a lot with it, but that suggests that he can, develop like.
I think the fact he was still able to win in those situations without necessarily having to move, that does speak to like how he is able to adapt and that defense is like a lot of, again, like scheme wise, it matters. Like it's a lot of different looks. There's a lot going on. They're kind of trying to throw stuff at a wall and see what sticks to a point,
Mm-hmm.
And it's not necessarily like the honed NFL environment of you play this technique in this situation, and now you play this technique in this situation, and you're basically going to use like 4 different techniques, and you're going to get really good at them. And you're going to play situations very, very definitely. Like, you're going to, like the base versus nickel discussion that we had, and the fact that when he's playing as a wide edge. That's the other thing with him as well, Tyree. Like, he's comfortable playing wide just because he's a big guy. Like, he lines up wide in a 2-point, and he's comfortable with that. His get-off's bad, but he can work the angles of that width well. Whereas Anderson,
absolutely.
I didn't see it, but like he didn't get as many ops in that situation, but he doesn't want to get like tight. He wants to play tight to a tackle most of the time, like in terms of the way he rushes, because that's how he needs to get into guys to then get his power working.
Yeah.
And whereas Wilson, like he's fine working wider angles.
Like, as crazy as it sounds to say, but to like hammer home like what he is, if they were playing their old 4-3 scheme, he'd be the Leo. Like he'd be a Leo.
Right. Because it's and you just play it over all the time, and he can play the tight end, take away that C gap, just running through a tight end.
Right.
Playing hard
and then a nickel doesn't matter, but right. So he's just an edge that is big. That doesn't mean he's a big end, as that phrasing goes, because that means a host of things.
I think there's no reason he couldn't do 5 tech. It's just I don't think, and like in the rush package,
as of yet, it's not his style. No, he has
it's so obvious he's a wide dude
for it. It's just not his skills yet. So like because before you can develop skills, you need to have the requisite traits for it. Like he has the traits for it. It's just not his game at the moment.
So what we're saying is
a projection there.
What we're saying is Tyree Wilson in Will Anderson's body and Will Anderson in Tyree Wilson's body.
It's odd, isn't it? No, I still
but that's kind of
there's
cool.
more there with Anderson, but
definitely.
Yeah.
And honestly, very cool. These are kind of unique players.
They are unique.
It's like cool. It's not like vanilla, boring stuff. There's stuff to think about here.
Yeah. Now, okay. Here's another thing, because all those things we talked about with Anderson, like where we tried to kind of explain away, like he was disadvantaged by the scheme a little bit, maybe the way he was coached. The fact that he was still so counting stat productive in spite of those things, I think that signals that he would take to coaching very well and very quickly if he was accentuated better. But that's just me,
he knew he's like, he knows, it's so obvious that he knows exactly what's going on. Like he's very, very smart throughout plays.
Like the way he handles like conflict, like run, like quarterback, running back conflict in the quarterback run game, the way he understands. Knows he's being read, the way he understands gap scheme when there's pullers away and on the front side of it. I mean, that would make massive difference for the run defense too. Like for the same reasons we talked about Tyree Wilson raising the floor, they're 2-4-5. Nwosu and Anderson, their ability to play stout and get vertical against the run into the backfield, I mean, he would also help there tremendously. The other side of it is that, no, go ahead.
Well, and Anderson also could be really comfortable. Like he plays every down still. He's an every down player. Like
now
2-4-5 wise, it'd be interesting to see him in more of those pure pass situations. And what Seattle does, like they've openly said this, is they've got XOS Catapult, which is where the college teams watch film. They just go in and watch, like filter out, create clear pass situations. Like with Darrell Taylor, literally their main thing was, we watched Tennessee film with just him in the pure pass situations. And, we saw stuff like that as well. He was just ridiculous, like dipping the edge. And that was basically it. Now, obviously, there's a bit more to it. But, like, with Anderson, it's a shame that in those situations, a lot of the time, he's having to do some grunt work for other players for, like, a variety of reasons. I did find it interesting that they reduced him down onto a guard at times. Again, I think to try and use his, power and work kind of more advantageous angles for himself and his skill set. But what I'm saying is he'd be able to play in the 2-4-5. He'd be able to set an edge really well still. There's no reason he wouldn't be able to do that. He'd be able to take his shots in the run game through his recognition pre-snap, a bit like how Nwosu did last year. But, and I'm sure, the wide rush stuff that would come. I need to...
The way I view Anderson is, like, we still, like, the ceiling may not, like the fuck off ceiling may not be there, but when I think that he has elite play strength and he'll have elite technique, the elite ability to corner. Those two things add up to very productive edge rushers. Even like what would take those types of players to even further heights, higher heights, new heights, is also having elite get off, elite bend. There are guys in the league right now that don't have elite bend, that don't have elite arc speed. They do have elite play strength and elite ability to corner technique, and they are 10+ sack guys every year. It's just, you're talking about like the tier 2 edge guys, which still get paid $15+ million a year, right? Combine that with elite run defense, I think the Will Anderson concept is worth a 5th overall pick, but maybe ideally 6, 7, 8, 9. But that's not going to happen. If you want him,
don't get cute.
You got to take him at 5.
Yeah. Because then it gets, and we will talk about this, but after Anderson, to your credit, Griff, you highlighted Tyree Wilson as like the guy right after Anderson.
Yeah.
Pretty sure he was, were talking about him very early.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that pops. Now, the other idea of it is, forget about comparing Anderson and Wilson to each other in a vacuum. What's the opportunity cost of opportunity? I just said that. Oh no. But like trading back, getting Wilson at 7, 8, 9, and then the additional pick versus only getting Anderson, right?
I think the Lions take Tyree.
Think so. Yeah. Or do they take
They kept doing that in my PFF mock draft. God damn it.
PFF never lies. They might want a quarterback though.
Yeah. We'll have to see. But yeah, I don't think you can get too cute with it. And honestly, this has been a great exercise because I was thinking, I really like Jalen Carter. There's it's probably not going to happen. I'm a bit upset about that. But these other two guys there's maybe a tad less certainty about some very important things than you'd like. But ultimately, the draft's never certain, even though these are important questions that we're asking. And, focusing on what they can do well, both would bring really exciting things to the Seahawks where you're like, they improve the defense and in an area that needs improving. So that's massively encouraging. Griff, do you have anything to add on that? And then we'll get to a few questions.
No, I think that's it.
Right. Derek Gilbert. Derek, thank you so much. You have been a long time watcher, supporter. Thank you for the donation. What do you all know about Derek Hall? Jim Nagy of the Senior Bowl just tweeted a cool video of him. So that is the Auburn guy who was at the Senior Bowl. So Griff, cast your mind back to that. He was 6'2". Let me check. I think he was 6'2", 6'2", basically 6'3", 252 pounds with 34 3/8 inch long arms. So immediately I'm looking at that and thinking, well, he meets the arm length requirement, but like Seattle would probably want him slightly bigger because it sounds like he's more of a edge setting, like that's like a 5 tech who's 20 pounds too small if you think about how Seattle would play that. But you can't just scout the body types. I remember when we did our Senior Bowl defensive recap, he didn't really stand out to you. Like you didn't really mention him, but most of his reps at the Senior Bowl, which popped, I think, were like most of his Senior Bowl reps were like wrecking the tight end towards the 3 technique, which is like good 4-3 end play. But I'm not sure how it fits Seattle right now. Maybe he bulks up slightly. I don't know. But you watched him at Auburn.
I don't think he needs to bulk up. I feel like he's actually, because everyone in this class is like, everyone that's explosive is too light. Everyone that's bigger is a tweener. He's the only guy that has prototypical composition where you're not super worried about like size. I feel like for an outside linebacker, I think he's a legit outside linebacker. The problem is that he has good speed to power. He has good play strength. I just think he's lacking like exciting levels of twitch. Like he doesn't need to be first round level twitch, but like even like second round level get off, arc speed and stuff. He's a smooth mover. Like he has good movement skills. It's just everything is just like the Madden sliders are just depressed a little bit. They're just dampened. And but other than that, like he's kind of he kind of checks off a lot of like prototype or archetypal boxes. It's just not at an exciting level. So like he's a classic, like to me, 3rd round pick who, if he becomes like a mensch technique wise, he could be a productive player. But like he's really he's the only guy that is those things I mentioned who doesn't have like a concerning red flag as far as like viability goes, that is also like young. Like KJ Henry, I don't dislike. Byron Young, I don't dislike, but they're 24 years old, 25 years old right now. He's 21. So, and he, he has production.
Can he drop into coverage?
He can. If Benson Mayowa can do it, Derek Hall can do it. Again, we're not talking about guys that are carrying receivers downfield. Like you're just buzzing to the flat, right? I think that Hall is a guy that, the floor is high enough in enough areas where if he could continue to progress, and it's a possibility with his age being what it is, that he could be something in the NFL. He's a guy of the late day 2, early day 3 guys that I would be the most intrigued by.
So they got that's cool, because there was me thinking this is like a small big end, because I saw 2 clips in testing the edge, but he's actually and I saw the short and long, but he's actually an outside linebacker who's just a bit short, and you can set an edge. That's interesting. They need like a solid run defender. It's just you'd like him to offer a bit more in the kind of pass rush and pass rush potential ceiling.
Now, there is one name I totally forgot to mention, and this was not the edge breakdown, because we're going to do breakdowns of each position group in depth. But like one name I didn't even mention was the Kansas State guy, Felix Anudike Uzoma. He's a guy that I would earlier, just to contextually give an idea, like earlier when we talked about BJ Ojolari, probably after Ebiketie with Mafe, Drake Jackson, Benito, etc., he'd be right in there with those guys. So he's another guy that we'll get into. I need to watch more of him. I think that he might be a little stiff at the top of the arc, but he's still like a get off guy. He's a speed rusher with power and strength. I just don't think he's just crazy agile, which is why he's a second rounder, not a first rounder. But he's a productive player. I think more of a classic 4-3 end, but you can fit 4-3 ends into a 3-4 outside linebacker if they're good enough. So he's the other guy to look for.
Because Kansas State was fairly decent on defense. I'm pretty sure he was the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah, he could be a good player. He could be a good player. He just doesn't. I just don't think he's a first rounder.
Yeah, he was.
He has very good technique too. Felix does. Like, he knows what he's doing. Like, he's an edge rusher. He knows.
And a junior, so not a bad thing.
Yeah. Right. I will say I don't like Foskey very much, but I need to watch his junior year because I think he played hurt this year.
Okay. And Hooch Sniper donated as well. Thank you very much, Hooch Sniper. Appreciated. Right. That is that. I think here was you saying there will be like 10 minutes on each guy, and we've done quite a good show, a lengthy, meaty show. So enjoy the meaty show, and we'll be back after the combine with reactions to some of the testing. Suddenly we'll know whose arms are too short or who can't jump high enough and all of that stuff. And it will just focus things down, probably clear up some draft boards, and we can really hone in on that. Also, then really quickly, we'll be getting into free agency, won't we? And hopefully Geno Smith will resign, obviously, at the combines when people talk and things get done, deals get made. Ty and I will be back tomorrow with a news recap, so make sure you tune in for that. There's a lot of news. There's a lot of news as it pertains to the Seahawks and also Seahawks adjacent. Right. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Follow Griff at CMikeSpinMove. Follow me at Matty F. Brown. Like the video. Comment if you haven't already. Been great. We've had a lot of people in here. It's clearly a good time. Happy weekend. Follow the podcast at Seattle Overload. Download the show. It's so easy. Just go on your phone. Open up Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, SoundCloud, other weird podcast things. Download the show at Seattle Overload and give it a 5-star review. Very simple. It does help out. And until next time, have a good night. Oh, and Newcastle play on Sunday in the first final of my lifetime. And it's the first since 1950. So